Swara Van Riper, Ingraham, Donahue. Okay, they are just trying to convey the idea that rather than viewing politics administration separation completely, right, we can look for new models of the association. So one is politicization model, right? What is politicization model? Which is normally visible. In Indian context also, more or less, most of the countries we find this model. Right? Then there was overlapping model, right, which can be considered to be a better model, because there the politics and administration associate for some constructive purpose. Then boundary model, right? Boundary model is supposed to be more ideal model. Both exist in their boundaries. They don't try to encroach or interfere on each other. That is a good model, fine, but hardly visible. Then you have absolute separation. That is what dichotomy is. So absolute separation model is like the French model, right? Administrative system model or administrative law, continental law model over here. So Wilson basically wanted that, right? But how will that happen? Through reforms. What kind of reforms? Constitutional reforms. You cannot directly change the system, right? So you have to change the constitution, amend it, and then probably propose for the independence of administration. Itna samajh mein aa gaya? Fine. So what will be the implication? Right? Now, should we agree that Wilson is father? No, you don't agree. You discarded the father now. So who should be father? Wilson, right? Goodnow is father of American ProdEgy. So it's not about the title, right? It's more about the initiation. So at least Wilson can be credited with the initiation of the idea, even though he does not give any concrete content for that, right? But the ideas of business, science, systematic study, okay, dominance of majority, problems of democracy, all these ideas became relevant and at least the starting point for the content of public administration. So can we say that dichotomy became, or idea of dichotomy became synonymous to the emergence of public administration, right? So dichotomy led to emergence of ProdEgy, or ProdEgy led to the emergence of dichotomy. If we take Wilson's essay as the basis, then dichotomy obviously leads to the emergence of public administration. But if we take the European context, they were already writing about it since long time. If we take Kautilya, if we take Machiavelli, many other scholars who have already contributed to the study of administration. So we can say, yes, it may be the study of administration which led to the emergence of dichotomy. Why? Because the moment we'll try to study administration, we'll try to focus on a system. What that system would be? Bureaucracy or public administration. So the moment we want to study administration, we will demarcate it from the political system. So the urge for study will also lead to dichotomy, right? Dichotomy will also lead to the content. So it is like chicken and egg. Murgi anda, kaun aaya pehle? So this debate is like chicken and egg typology, right? It may not be understood in a very compartmentalized idea. So we can always say that yes, both have influence on each other. Further development of administration was based on dichotomy. So when dichotomy comes into picture, then what happens now? It has a lot of implications. For example, if I treat administration separate from politics, there will be some repercussions for society. Right? There will be some consequences for their relationship, consequences for policy, right? Yes, consequences for citizens. Many things will happen. So there is a, what you can say, sub topic of analysis called the consequence or impact of dichotomy. So as dichotomy emerges as an area of study, or it is considered to be the focus of the study of ProdEgy, many people become concerned about the problem of accountability. That how to make administration accountable? Will they be accountable to people? If not, then what will happen? Will they become too powerful? Right? So they started these debates. Okay, that is called as the dilemma of dichotomy. So the topic है dilemma of dichotomy. Dichotomy is good also, it is bad also. Fine. So you kindly give that heading. Kautilya. Fine. Otherwise, you can take Cornwallis. Right? Cornwallis is called the father of civil services of India. Cornwallis, Macaulay, Curzon also to an extent. But India did not contribute to the original development of the subject. Fine. So when something emerges, then everybody starts saying that, oh, I knew about it. This always happens. So if you qualify civil services, everybody will say, oh, I know this was a good student. If you don't, then they'll say, I told you not to do it. This is inherent human nature. So the moment someone highlights that there is a need to study, people will start looking for their own references. India may be hua ki nahi hua, right? So ultimately, see, every country will have its own specimen of administration or study of administration. But everything may not be accepted as the universal knowledge. So Americans or Europeans were more concerned about universal knowledge. We were more concerned about the description and explanation of what was happening in our country. So Kautilya is more relevant to the context of monarchy in India at that time. Right? But his principles remain relevant today also. Right? But not necessarily relevant in the global system, but maybe relevant to the, what you can say, Asian subcontinent. Or if there are some monarchies today, there are already, right? Then maybe certain principles of Kautilya may be relevant today, but not all the aspects. Why? Because his concept of state itself is very different. We are talking about a democratic state. He is talking about a monarchical state. Right? So the very framework in which we have to view those things, they are very different from each other. Right? But still, he also talks about many things, no doubt. So you have written dilemma of dichotomy. You write few things. Right. the emergence of the emergence of the concept of dichotomy provided the intellectual basis, right? It was the starting point, intellectual basis for the emergence of the nascent field nascent is just emerging, immature, right? Starting nascent field of public administration. Public administration, right? It was based on the belief that that administrative efficiency and competence administrative efficiency and competence can only be achieved through depoliticization can only be achieved through depoliticization of administration. There are both supporters and critics of this idea. Supporters and critics of this idea as it would lead to several consequences. It would lead to several consequences for politics, administration, administration, and citizens. Ultimately, democracy is answerable to people, and must be guided by principles of participation, consensus, consensus, and popular control, that is people's control, right? Popular control over authority institutions. Okay. This leads to the following concerns regarding the dichotomy. Number one, concern for policies. What do you think? Policies will improve or decline? Do you think formulation and implementation, okay, they may be treated as two parts of the same system? So essentially, they cannot be separated. In fact, they should not be separated. But if we have to improve implementation, somewhere we have to hide it from the impact of politics. But if we have to improve formulation, we have to somewhere integrate the administration into politics. See, this is a dilemma. If I shield one from the other, then how can I allow the other one to enter into the first one or to interact with the previous one? This is a dilemma. So how can we do that? What should we do that this happens, that our decline? You can we form systems for them? Now, when government makes policies or ministers make policy, how do they involve the administration? Yesterday we wrote all this. वो क्या था भैया? हड़प्पन पेंटिंग थी सब. There is a ministry, there is a department or secretariat, right? Directorate, field office, regional office. See, they are seamlessly connected. You cannot eliminate secretary from the ministry. But how can that be done? right? It can be done by creating appropriate platforms. For example, Prime Minister's office. So what will PMO do? Functions are defined, right? So there is a sphere of competence of administration when it interacts with politics. So when a person who is heading the PMO, principal secretary, when he is heading the PMO, his duties, functions are well defined. And if they are defined, then probably there will be no scope of unnecessary interaction. Cabinet secretary, well defined role. See, the problem arises where these roles are not defined. So politicization will only happen when the administrative systems are not regulated by proper channels. Only then politicization can take place. So if we focus on neutrality, right? If we focus on rules, regulations, procedures, and monitoring of these procedures continuously, then the tendency will reduce. So even if you say the bureaucrats will be willing to oblige their political masters, right? They will be, but there will be a system of checks and balance that you cannot go beyond this point. See, second ARC has provided some suggestions that a minister-civil servant relationship should be guided by wisdom, right? Should be guided by common sense. It's not necessary that minister will every time tell the administrator, do this or do that. Administrators have to think what is needed in a situation and act. It's not necessary that minister or secretary has to every time take direction from the minister. He already is the head of the administration. He knows what to do. So if the areas of interaction will reduce, unnecessary interactions will reduce, right? They can work independently, even though staying together. Right? So see, it is possible that they may exist, but yes, this is a big problem, that policies may not improve if administration doesn't contribute. The moment administration contributes, there is always a danger of politicization. So if civil servants give free, not free, fair, right? Free matlab freely, right? Free, fair, independent, right? Factual advice, then it will be correct. If they start giving subjective advices, right? Sir, मुझे ऐसा लगता है, right? But this is the report, right? Based on this report, these are the conclusions. Use the conclusions to make the policy. Simple. But what I feel, what you feel is immaterial. What data says is important. So if our policies are driven by facts, if they are driven by evidence, right? If they are driven by quantitative techniques, then probably the content of the policies will not reflect the personal views of these people. Many times policies reflect the ideological views of the government. And there, even if the administrator does not want, he has to act, right? Somewhere under the ideology of the government. So see, if the government says, no, we have an ideology, we have a purpose of mobilizing the majority, that is our agenda. Or one government says, I have to mobilize the minority, then what will a bureaucrat do? He will obviously strategically design the policies in that manner. So neutrality is one of the best means, right? Sphere of competence is the best means. And also defining the jurisdiction of both fact-based policies. You're right. Right. Likhiye, within this you write. Public policies, that is policies made by the government. Public policies require a close interaction between formulators and implementers. Formulators and implementers. Even though formulation is more political is more political and administration is administrative, still to make efficient policies, the role of civil servants is inevitable for formulation. Without, next line, without getting affected, politically, the civil servants must provide free, fair, and factual advice. That is evidence-based. To improve the content of policies. For this, focus should be on maintaining neutrality, defining the sphere of competence, of administrators, and promoting checks and balances, for ensuring impartial contribution of civil servants. In the bracket you write of civil servants. In the bracket you write, okay, administrative organizations like PMO or Cabinet Secretariat, PMO, Prime Minister's Office, or Cabinet Secretariat have well-defined functions, under the Transaction of Business Rules 1961. Under the Transaction of Business Rules 1961. That is the scope of politicization is minimal. But political control over top level appointments, political control over top level appointments. And different ministries controlling controlling the cadre of right. Cadre is like corps, not the dead corpse, right? But the group, like you have National Cadet Corps, right? Just like the group. So different ministries are the cadre, or they control the cadre of different services, like Ministry of Home for IPS, right? Ministry of Personnel for IAS. Cadre of different services, etc. creates problems of politicization. See, every service you have in the civil services, it is controlled by, or its cadre, right? Its strength, its group is controlled by some ministry. So ultimately, ministries have lot of control over them in terms of their service conditions: transfer, promotion, appointment, removal, suspension, and likewise. Because of that, again, the problem of politicization is visible. So see, it is like a dilemma that if we define rules and regulations, the neutrality can be maintained, right? In spite of that, there are also opportunities where politicization can happen. So how do we overcome, right? We can only overcome by promoting ethical, moral, right, behavior. So one of the best means of doing it is to provide platforms, but ultimately motivate civil servants or even politicians for enforcing certain standards of conduct. Agar wo nahi hoga, then whatever rules and regulation you make, there will always be problem. So policies can be improved if they align together, but they should not encroach on each other. So they can come together and act, but not necessarily impact each other negatively. So there is a scholar, Paul Appleby, right? He says that what is needed is commitment to policy, not commitment to politics. What is your duty, उसके लिए committed हो, right? Government क्या है, political party क्या है, उसके लिए commitment नहीं चाहिए, right? देखिए, in conclusion, right? In conclusion, we can say that 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 the administration must be committed to policies, not to politics. Or same thing in a different way, or we need politics or political neutrality, right? But not policy neutrality. So we need political neutrality, but not policy neutrality. Neutral towards political ideology, not towards policy. So we should be committed to policies, the goals which we have to pursue, but we should be neutral to the influences of politics. So Paul Appleby is a person who brings this idea that whenever we are talking about neutrality, we are talking about the bad influence of politics. Be neutral to that. But we are not talking about the goals of the government, right? Whatever the goals government has decided, you have to be very committed to that. Any goal, see, if collector implements Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, right? So if the party in power is not BJP today, but the program remains, will the collector not implement it? So then whose commitment is, or to whom is he committed? He is not committed to politics. What happens in the political sphere, he is not concerned. Or he should not be concerned, right? But see, there is another collector. The moment party goes out of power, right, he becomes depressed. What will happen now? Who will protect me? Right? All this scam they did and they left me now. See, what will be his concern? His concern will be politics. Right? There are secretaries who are more involved in party politics. Okay, they are more involved in choosing candidates, telling the chief minister what to do, what not to do, right? But not related to government, but related to their political ideology. And it is at so many places. Right? So whether you say your NIA is quite instrumental in the Kashmir policy, nahi hai. Mr. Doval is not instrumental. Policy with China, policy with Pakistan, right? He's a strategic expert. But that does not come without some ideological influence. So it is not at all possible that a public servant will be totally neutral to the government under which he is working. Right? But should he be too interested about it? No. The moment he realizes that there is political interference now, right, or the minister is going beyond the usual limit of interaction, he should refrain from there. Okay, that is why second ARC they have recommended that both ministers and secretaries or civil servants should have code of ethics. Right. Okay. In spite of the above mechanisms, in spite of the above mechanisms, it is obvious that politics will create opportunities. Politics will create opportunities for encroachment. And so the best solution can be developing a code of ethics for both politicians as well as administrators. In the bracket you write suggested by second ARC 2005, second ARC 2005, and also by Nolan Committee UK and Douglas Committee USA. These are the two major committees which are formed globally for promoting ethics in governance. Second ARC has also been inspired by them. Right? But Justice Douglas Committee came in 2008, Nolan somewhere in 1992-93. These both have also impacted and they have also suggested. Now what we have written is not what Wilson is saying. What we have written is the implication, the impact. So here what we have done, now we have integrated paper 1 with paper 2. This is how you interlink. You don't have to interlink forcibly, है ना? So आपको जो है जबरदस्ती जो arrange marriage नहीं कराना है उनका. It will be a natural love affair which will emerge if you understand the concepts of both. So seamlessly you have to link this to this. So when we are discussing this theory, right, we are also trying to imply this theory in the context of Indian administration or in general administration anywhere, which automatically includes Indian administration. So ये जो problem है, ये India में भी है, right? Not just USA or any other democracy. In most of the democracy, this problem is, and India is also one of them. So when we are trying to give solutions, these solutions can be equally applicable to India, right? Or they can also be derived from Indian context. You understanding? That is one issue. Policies कैसे improve हो. Second, the concern for, first you have written, concern for policies, concern for accountability. What is accountability? Answerable. So your parents send money. Do you send them account in the end of the month? They ask for the account? So they ask? Good. Who else? Boys, do you submit? You can't write all those things that you do, you know? And you have to write books only, you know? Books, notes. Then your father will be, how every day? Why every week you are buying some books or notes? Right? When you are obligated to give an account for something to somebody in a particular way, that is called accountability. So it must answer three questions, right? To whom? For what? How? Right? If you have these three things answered, right, then you say you have been able to enforce accountability. So you must get the answers for all three. You are answerable to whom, for what, and how. So it has three dimensions. At least this should be answered. I am answerable to someone, yes. If you are, then there is accountability. For what are you answerable? Is it defined? It is defined. Then there is accountability. Right? How? Is it mentioned? How will you do it? Yes, it is. So see, accountability simply means to give an account for, or give an account of. Account of what? Your authority. The position that you occupy That position comes with authority and some responsibilities. So using this authority, you have to discharge some functions. Yes, Ashutosh, correct. भाई कौन सा वाला correct है ये सोचना पड़ेगा है ना. Fine. So you are accountable only when you have something, right, to be responsible for. So it is said that if you are accountable, then you must have some authority. Without authority, accountability has no meaning. So authority होगी तो responsibility होगी, right? या responsibility होगी तो authority दी जाएगी. You will be given authority, and once this equivalence is created between authority and responsibility, and then if it is enforced now, it is evaluated now, then it is called accountability. So generally, accountability emerges from the legal position you occupy. Legal. So if you're occupying a position, right, so technically if your father says you're accountable to me, yes, because you are taking money. Otherwise you are responsible. You're not accountable. If you're not drawing any specific benefit, right, or you're not taking anything formally, then what arises more is of responsibility, right? By virtue of being father, I have to answer you, but by virtue of being father, nothing else. That is more of biological, natural, right? Familial, relational accountability, nothing else. So the word accountability generally comes or has a meaning only in a formal legal setup. So if your father appoints you director of his company after him, then you become accountable. Otherwise, you may be more responsible, less accountable. Fine, it is possible. So accountability arises from position. Position gives you authority. Right? Authority creates certain obligations. Responsibilities. So position, some authority. Authority is given which creates obligation. Obligations are in the form of responsibilities or functions you perform. So every public servant who is part of a hierarchical system, who is enjoying some position, right? He is or he should be answerable for his actions. The use of authority, that is called accountability. So when you have administration, right, which is enjoying authority and performing certain tasks, now you have administration. This administration must be accountable to someone. To whom? Right? So normally, right, you think of accountability, right, in two forms or two dimensions. One, internal, other, external. Internal is within the system. So when you are answerable to your boss within the department, right? Joint secretary answerable to secretary, deputy secretary answerable to joint secretary, under secretary answerable to deputy secretary, assistant secretary answerable to under secretary, and likewise. So when within the department or within the organization, these subordinates are answerable to superior through a mechanism, and superior controls the subordinate. Internal departmental accountability. So every administration, every system of administration is having an internal control of accountability. Internal mechanism of accountability. See, so any system which is designed this way, there is a boss, head of, and he makes his subordinates answerable to him. See, every superior to his subordinates, superior to his subordinates, superior to his subordinates, right? This is how they make. Because his immediate boss is his head, right? Not the ultimate head. For every subordinate, his boss is his head. And likewise, there is a chain. So see, this person ultimately becomes accountable to him because he becomes accountable to him, he to him, he to him, and likewise. So there is a chain. This chain is called chain of command, right? This chain is also called red tape. So we use the word red tapeism, lal fita, shahi, right? Red tapeism. So it is basically a kind of reference to the red tape they used to, or the threads, red threads they used for binding the files. So they now control each other, simple, right? So if we have a system where the boss controls the subordinate, again boss controls the subordinate, everyone controls the subordinate or his subordinate, automatically system is controlled, right? What about him? Now he is making everyone accountable. But who will make him accountable? Government, right? So let's say administrator, so he should somewhere be accountable to minister. Right? Minister is the boss of this HOD, secretary. So minister can make the administration accountable. But we are talking about dichotomy. That is our concern, no? Accountability. So when we use a dichotomy as a model, when we think of that principle of politics and administration separation, then how will this come into picture? That is the concern. That if administration is autonomous, it is efficient, right, well designed, everything is fine. But then how will it be made accountable? So till here, it's okay, right? The boss can make the others accountable. But who will make this boss accountable? If there is no ministerial control, who will make him? This is the problem. How can they be made accountable? So see what dichotomy does. It creates the problem of accountability. See, he is also a public servant. He is also an administrator. They are all part of his own group. Fine? Understanding? So it's like Azharuddin is the coach of the cricket team, who was once the captain of the team. He was also the player in the team, right? So obviously he'll be more sympathetic to his own people, more empathetic to his own people. See, so ultimately they are all part of the same gang. Is it or not? You are an IAS, your subordinate is an IAS, somebody is a PCS, you are all coming from the same system. Now collectively you want to loot the system. So what will you do? You will divide the functions amongst yourselves. है कि नहीं? DSP collect करो, right? SP जो है distribute करो, constables जो है चालान बढ़ाओ. This is what they do. So ultimately there should be someone who should not be from this system. How will automatically judiciary come here? You tell me. Day-to-day functioning अगर judiciary control करेगी तो फायदा क्या होगा? Fine. Judges already deny कर रहे हैं कि भाई we are not concerned with marriage. You solve your own issues. The purpose will be defeated. No, see, judiciary does not have this role. Judiciary has more important role to play. It's not going to monitor everyday functioning of the administration. Right? So judiciary is also made the system to make them accountable. Then ultimately, right, the judiciary will have to keep a monitoring on the system. So judiciary already exists as a control, but not day to day, right? Not concurrent. It can only come when you go to judiciary. Fine. Right. So if the political control is reduced or eliminated, right, then it will be difficult to make them accountable. So the concept of, see, external accountability comes. That ministerial control is also important, right? So even if we have dichotomy, right, we may have efficiency, but ultimately accountability will suffer. So some people suggested why it will suffer. Why don't we improve the mechanisms here? Right? Let's improve the laws, regulations, codes in such a manner that they cannot be corrupt. But ultimately, still there will be a problem because he is all powerful. So, in spite of system being accountable, right, there is a lacuna, there is a weakness. So, there were people who supported that accountability can be improved through internal functions, internal mechanisms. What internal mechanisms? Like code of conduct. Have a strong code of conduct. Have code of ethics. Code of ethics क्या होता है? See, internal accountability, how can it be improved? Let's imagine this way, that we agree to the idea of dichotomy and we say it's okay. The political control is not required, right? Let's make the system so strong that nobody can make a mistake, nobody can become corrupt. So what should we do? If you want to improve the functioning of administration, right, without the interference of politics, then you should improve your internal functioning. How will you improve it? It's a simple thing. Technology नहीं use कर सकते. CCTV, correct? Biometrics. Why not? See? Definitely we can improve the monitoring. Right? Then what else we can do? See? Develop code of conduct. Fine. Code of conduct can be developed, and this code of conduct क्या होता है? Okay. There are some defined principles, defined regulations. So everyone in the system has to operate and act in a particular manner. If not, there will be a punishment. So we call them as professional codes of conduct. Every profession has its code of conduct. Doctors, code of conduct. Engineers, code of conduct. Civil servants, code of conduct. Lawyers, code of conduct, right? So everybody has code of conduct. Then we can also have code of ethics. Right? What is code of ethics? Right? Through constitution, that is also correct. But Aryan, it will be external. Correct, but so how do we do it? Code of conduct जो है सिर्फ internal नहीं है, intrinsic है. Internal, we are talking about procedures in the system. Intrinsic, we are talking about internal to human being. So it is not just internal, it is intrinsic. Code of ethics are moral guidelines which are not law, right? So they are not law. They are some moral guidelines which are, what you can say, desirable or appropriate behavior that are desired from public servants, which they follow voluntarily. सो कोड ऑफ एथिक्स को फॉलो करना है इंट्रिंसिकली और voluntarily. It is not something which can be imposed from outside. If it is imposed from outside, it will become code of conduct, not code of ethics. So code of ethics क्या होता है? Some moral guidelines which people accept as something desirable. So when you say you should not promote corruption or promote misuse of authority in your office, then what? Somebody takes it a moral duty that even if there is no law, right, but it is my duty that I should at least look for any instance where corruption is taking place, stop it. If you don't do it, you cannot be punished because there is no law. So when you say there are moral, ये क्या है? सब moral appeals हैं, ठीक है? Moral appeals किसको अपील कर रहे हैं हम? Correct, but these are moral appeal to your conscience, right? Your inner voice. We are appealing to that. कि काइंडली लालच छोड़ दो, बेटा चॉकलेट खाना छोड़ दो, हाँ? So we are appealing to that conscience that someday the voice will reach that conscience, right?